Hey guys, it's Jennifer again. This is video number 4 in my series, Fraud in Toronto. Today I'm going to be talking about the police and the investigation. Please excuse the hat, I'm having a bad hair day. Two birds with one stone. Happy birthday Canada, it's July 1st. So, when I went to talk about the police, the hair got upset, ran into the skull, didn't want to come out. So, as you may be aware, when a crime is allegedly committed, the first action is to report to the police and have them investigate. They then put the facts together to recommend or decline prosecution. They are the frontline defenders of the justice system. So, the Bank of Montreal filed a report on February 22nd, 2001. Mohammed Sharif, who was my then supervisor, reported that he had no idea how or why the vendor Select Technologies was used for the web project. He was co-managing this project with one Richard Button. This was how the investigation started. Heather Clark-Smith and Wade Alfonso was assigned to the case. Wade Alfonso had 24 years experience in 2001. I have no idea about Heather, but she appeared to be the lead investigator. Heather recommended prosecution and the Attorney General's office agreed. She would be involved until February 2004 when my case went to trial. I never saw Wade Alfonso after I was arrested on May 1st, 2001. May 1st, Heather and Wade staked out my home from about 6 a.m. She saw me walking my dog, then followed me as I dropped off my 11-year-old son to his school. I was handcuffed and frisked by Wade Alfonso in the schoolyard in full view of the parents, the children, teachers, and my son. Heather and Wade then tried to interview me at the Milner police station. When I politely declined, the threats started. She was going to call the Children's Aid for my son. I did not know it yet, but this was typical of black arrests. Humiliate and degrade with the arrest, then threaten and intimidate their kids. She was as bombastic as she was obnoxious. The next day there was a news conference and the Sun newspaper carried a story of how I had embezzled funds from the Bank of Montreal and they had found offshore accounts with no monies in them. This was an absolute lie. I was begging my lawyers, all 5 of them, to subpoena these documents for me, but that fell on corrupt ears. Heather did not have a warrant for my arrest, which I am told meant she did not have probable cause. It meant that their reasonable belief of my criminality must be based on facts. The police and prosecutor must possess enough facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe that the claim or charge is true. Heather tried very hard to have the courts deny bail and bemoaned the fact that I had family willing to vouch for me. I did eventually get bail. Over the next 3 years, I trudged to bail and parole every single day to check in. I had to give up my passport, but I had to attend this office every day, and if I missed one single day, my bail would be revoked, my freedom and trial compromised. Someone did try to say that I did not check in one day, but luckily I could prove I was there. And from then on, I decided to log the officer's badge number who signed me in daily. This really did not go over well with the officers. Thank God they understood that it was not my intention to aggravate anyone, and things went smoothly after the first 2 days. I came to understand that revocation of bail is a tool often utilized by law enforcement to make deals with defendants, lock them up, make them afraid with threats, stress them out to admit to something they never did. On or about August 2001, I was given 4 volumes of disclosures from Heather. They really did not say much. But I found out that the bank had filed a report when they had done it and what was the cause. The bank did a subsequent investigation and found another vendor called Twisted Pair Cables Inc. for the M-Banks project, who, according to them, had taken another $1 million and not delivered any equipment to the Bank of Montreal. They claimed that all of the equipment on the purchase orders had said it was being shipped to Alberta, but there was no equipment in Alberta. Therefore, this was a fraud. The bank had further located, on the day I was arrested, they claimed that they had gotten some documents out of my recycle box for a company called Calby Systems Inc. This was another $1 million they claimed that was stolen from the bank and no equipment was delivered. The document was discovered by one Thomas Cheel of the firm Kroll Lindquist AV. He also informed Heather that funds were located in the Bahamas. This is what had been reported in the press conference. This was all contained in the 4 volumes of disclosures. Heather recorded that I had a house financed from Bank of Nova Scotia. This was another lie. I had never done business with Scotiabank. I would never get the disclosures for this as well. The bank supplied the following to the police as evidence of wrongdoing. They had 16 volumes of logs from the receiving area, which Heather gave me sometime on September 2002. There was a verbal indication that she intended to use these records to prove that equipment was not received by the bank. A careful analysis of these logs by me proved that no purchase order was ever recorded in these logs for any company, including the 3 I was being charged with. She presented an affidavit from Roddy Allen, the forensic accountant from Kroll, who was employed by the bank's lawyers from the law firm of Teplitsky Colson. This affidavit was released in March of 2002 to the prosecutor, the police, the bank's lawyers, and my lawyer, G. Peter Abrams. All of the banking statements for each company was listed in this report. You know, all of the incomings and outgoing monies that the bank paid to the companies and monies that the company paid to vendors for equipment that went to the bank. There was also a one-pager consisting of all of the technicians employed by the Bank of Montreal throughout the provinces. She had gone to ask the technicians if they had ever heard of Calby Systems. They all answered no. There was an email from one John Haas in Toronto. He was a supervisor of one Brad Ferguson. This was the person who installed equipment for the M-Banks project. You remember the one who they claimed shipped the equipment to Alberta. There was nothing there. This project was installed at Blow Street in Toronto. The criminal trial was scheduled for June 2nd, 2003. But 4 days before my trial, Heather called my lawyer to say there was a tape and 13 binders missing from the disclosures. Apparently, Heather and Wade had interviewed Mohammed Sharif on December 10th, 2001, but the tape had not been disclosed to me. Apparently, Heather's schedule did not tell her she had a trial on June 2nd, for which she had to supply further disclosures. And I think my lawyer was conspiring with Heather. This was one of the reasons why my first trial was put off. Heather had delivered to me personally all of the receiving area logs, a second copy of the affidavit of Roddy Allen, and other documents in September of 2002, but had withheld the tape. The 13 binders contained limited information from the affidavit of Roddy Allen. The tape nor the binders would ever make it to my criminal trials, and when I eventually listened to the tape and read the binders, I realized why. First of all, I had to listen to the tape about 6 to 8 times. The tape was as though it was demagnetized. You cannot hear what is being said clearly. But I followed along because they had a synopsis, they had a transcript of the tape, or a synopsis of the tape that was about 1 hour and 53 minutes in length. I have heard from lawyers from the Innocence Project that a signed affidavit by a witness is clear, factual, clean, and objective. Whereas if the police fears that the witness is going to change their statement, they will generate a tape. Fact of the matter is that by March of 2002, Heather Clark Smith, Wade Alfonso, and the prosecutor Suhail Akhtar knew that everything the Bank of Montreal and Mohammed Sharif had been telling them was a lie. On the tape recorded, Heather asked about 30 questions, most of them irrelevant. But Mohammed Sharif is heard referencing the investigation as his investigation, and gave Heather a lesson on how the fraud was perpetrated. He said Jennifer would set up a fictitious company managed by a family member, and then use an open RFA number, note the goods as received, and send the invoice for payment to head office. I would then pocket the money, and the bank got no equipment. It was as easy as that. Mohammed went on to say, I had too much control. I was raising orders, approving invoices, and this is why I could do this so easily. The bank was reviewing the process, and this could never happen again. I want to tell you here, I had no hand in the processes that the bank developed for their purchase orders. Heather followed up with a question. She said, could you explain what is meant by the RFA number? He explained it was the year, the 2 first digits was the year, the second digits were the department that raised the RFA, and the ending were just letters. He told Heather how he could prove the goods had not been received. For Kelby, nothing was in the receiving area logs. For Twisted, it was the ship to Alberta. Nothing was ever shipped to Alberta. For Select, it was his project. There were no documents on file, and he was not aware of the orders, and he was co-managing this project. He referenced a $38,000 amount that section manager John Marks could not account for. He told Heather that the companies were owned by family members and therefore fraudulent. March and April 2001, it is the bank's corporate security that is handling the investigation. There was approximately 17 people involved, with Mohammed running the show. On January 29, 2001, he had informed his vice president, Dave Golden, Dave Golden's boss, Michael Thornborough, who was the senior vice president of the Select Theft. And then corporate security was brought in. Then they had to read in the executive vice president, Rob Tetley. You know, Heather, even after what you did at my son's school, I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. I thought when she starts to investigate, she would find the truth. But you are a dunce. You know how to intimidate, aggravate, and humiliate, but you do not know how to investigate. Muhammad led you and Wade Alfonso like mules to a trough, and you drank the dirty water. Do you think that there's a fountain in the bank where I just walk in and scoop up money and no one would ever question me? Did you even think to ask how the RFA came into being? How or why did Jennifer control the RFA? Or even if she did? What was the oversight at the bank? How could Jennifer steal money from the bank for 10 years and no one, not even Mohammed, who was working on his own project, found her out when she was doing this? What was the process for procurement within the bank? Who was in charge of this money? Who reconciled this money? What process did Mohammed follow when he was administering his own project? Rob Tetley, Michael Thornborough, and Dave Golden knows the history of the RFA. They are the ones who sign off at some point. They knew that the line of business and section managers are responsible for the budget and final reconciliation of their projects. So to ride the Mohammed train made no sense to me whatsoever. What makes perfect sense is that they were aware that the bank had committed fraud against the government and they had no choice but to ride the mule train, or they were the dumbest things within the Bank of Montreal. You, Heather Clark Smith, and your cronies committed defamatory libel when you reported in that press conference that I had offshore accounts with no monies and that I had embezzled money from the Bank of Montreal. You are not only a dunce, you are a cowardly hypocrite and a corrupt cop. You knew that you would get sued for what you had done, so you hid the tape and the 13 binders and framed me for a crime that was never committed. A perfect storm was brewing. The skunks at the Bank of Montreal could now lie with impunity, and you could not tell the truth because of what you had done. When you received the affidavit of Roddy Allen, there were all the vendor invoices for the equipment delivered to the bank that they said they had not received. You acquired the receiving area logs and none of the purchase orders were listed. You had the John Haas memo confirming the M-Banks project being installed at Blow Street in Toronto, with invoices listed in the affidavit of Roddy Allen. They all denied Calby, but all of the invoices showed up. He told you about the M-Banks project for Twisted Pair Cables Inc., installed in Toronto, but you could not ask the questions because you were afraid of the answers. You were in serious legal jeopardy. Corporate security is now playing deaf and dumb as well. There's a very simple 1+1 from the RFA involved to solve the mystery of the Alberta deliveries. All of the information required was on the purchase orders. You now had confirmation on 2 of the 3 companies the bank had complained about. You knew at this point that the bank was lying. You knew Mohammed had a serious conflict of interest because he had the most to lose, but you never questioned the story because now you cannot. You are a lying, despicable hypocrite and a disgrace to your profession. It is not surprising that you wanted my trial put off, and that I was never given the 13 binders until 2012. It is no wonder I was then threatened by one Detective Vallis as I was trying to obtain these binders. She phoned my son, threatening to arrest his grandmother. She was certainly well trained. Intimidate the kids, the parents will give up. In the binders I eventually got, you had removed all references to Calby and Twisted Pair Cables Inc. One binder was filled with a scholarship fund document I had started for my son in 1990 that I was paying from my Bank of Montreal account. What relevance would this have to this trial? Minimal information from the affidavit of Roddy Allen was sorted in various ways to compile your 13 binders. The report from the technicians claiming they had no knowledge of Calby was missing. The mail from John Haas was missing. The receiving area logs were absent. All of the evidence you had supplied to say you had proof that I had stolen something were gone. Even a 3-year-old could have tried the case and won with the evidence that I had possessed. As you will see in the subsequent videos, the prosecution, defense lawyers, and judges appear to mimic the same immoral and criminal behaviors that Heather Clark Smith did. There was an uncanny coordination of criminal obstruction. How did you fall this far, Heather? As a woman, as a human being, and as an investigator, you were really a 0. But as a criminal, A+. Your lack of courage precipitated this avalanche of criminal behavior. All of Heather's disclosures could disprove fraud, but then it all disappeared. And it would be proven that she was not alone in this endeavor. As you will see, this is the rule, not the exception. There is just no data to support how often this kind of corruption is occurring within the system. Innocence Canada has a plane full of murder cases to review. Can you imagine how many other types of cases are out there to be reviewed? How many innocent people are convicted on false and corrupt prosecutors, police, and defense lawyers with judges thrown in? This is why I'm doing these videos. Please come forward if you have a story to tell. Welcome to the Toronto Justice System cesspool. These are your frontline defenders. The cesspool has begun and they are diving in headfirst. The next video will be about my preliminary trial with Judge Lipson, Prosecutor Suhail Akhtar, and lawyer G. Peter Abrams. Heather Clark Smith and Mohammed Sharif is also in this video.